Before I begin with my story, I'd like to state a few things. Before this had happened, both my parents had unfortunately died due to a major car accident about 2 months before this caused by a drunk driver. I was 20 at the time and had to work to pay rent for my apartment, so I was stuck financially with depression as well. In other words, I was pretty much on my own at this point in my life. Anyways, on with the story. In 2017, I worked as a cashier at a nearby McDonald's in my hometown in Scottsdale, Arizona. Scottsdale was a very nice city in Arizona. The people were nice and friendly and the weather was okay. Some days would be hot while others would be both hot and cold. The McDonald's I began working at was near the suburbs of Scottsdale, which just so happened to be in walking distance from my apartment. I drove to work once in a while if I didn't have a lot of time, but I figured why waste money and gas to go somewhere 10 minutes away when I could just walk. Anyway, my shifts would constantly change from afternoons to sometimes night. The day shifts were okay, but actually somewhat enjoyed the night shift, mainly because it was mostly quiet, and you maybe have about 5 or 6 customers come in for some fries once it was very late. There was this one incident where I experienced something that would stick with me for a very, very long time. It was a Friday night in the middle of the summer, and I was working the night shift at work. The night shift would normally be from 9 to 3 in the morning. Yes, the McDonald's I worked at was open 24 hours. Not many like that in Scottsdale, but they exist. Anyway, it was me and one of my other coworkers getting things set up for dinner service. Refilling sauces, frying french fries, etc. During this time, we normally have around 10 to 15 customers come in, but as it got more late, less people would start to show up. Fast forward to around 12, I was scrolling through Instagram by the register as there were no other customers for me to serve. All of a sudden, I hear the front door open and was greeted to a man in front of the register. Politely, I asked if I could take his order. He responded in a very low, deep tone saying, "Just get me a bottle of water." I don't know what it was, but there was something slightly off-putting about him. To give a bit of a description as to how he looked, he wore a pair of old stained ripped jeans and was also wearing a very dirty shirt and jacket. I told him that his total was 106 and he pulled out a $5 bill and handed it to me, making sure our hands touched. He said in the same voice, "Thanks, cutie. I'll be leaving now. You could keep the change." I could smell the cigarettes in his breath, and he then gave me a very creepy-looking grin that sent a shiver down my spine. He then thankfully left and disappeared into the night. I was officially creeped out at this point and went to go tell my coworker about what had happened. You'd often get a few creeps during the night shift, but I never encountered someone this creepy. The way he was dressed and the vibes he gave off and the cigarettes in his breath really freaked me out. I'd also like to mention that the McDonald's was located in the area which had a history of small crimes like break-ins and stuff like that. Anyway, fast forward to about 1 o'clock, the place was pretty much empty for the most part. It was just me and the other worker. The other worker had told me to go take out the trash and replace the bags. I hated taking out the trash, not because of the trash itself, but rather the night. It sounds childish, but ever since my childhood, I'd always have a fear of the dark, and for whatever reason, it stuck with me. I'm walking out of the McDonald's, heading toward the dumpster when I stopped dead in my tracks. Crouched down behind the dumpster was the same man from before, obviously waiting for me. By some miracle, he didn't see me, and I slowly stepped back and went inside. I told the other worker that I was calling the cops, and I did just that while explaining the situation to the operator. A cop car came within 5 minutes and of course arrested the guy still behind the dumpster. The man gave me a look I still can't describe. It was the look of hate, anger, and revenge, like the first thing he would do once he got out of jail would be to come back for me. However, the police said that they had found drugs, mostly GHB, which is a powder to put someone to sleep which are mainly used to spike people's drinks. They had also found rope, duct tape, obviously stolen wallets and credit cards. Whoever this guy was planning on robbing me out of my money. Who knows what would have happened to me had I not seen him hiding behind that dumpster. I used to work as a housekeeper at a very nice and luxurious hotel in South Miami. I'm sure most of you already know what a housekeeper is, but for those of you who don't, here's a brief description. A housekeeper is basically a hotel's maid. You'd renew the sheets after someone is checked out, make the beds, replace towels, clean rooms, and replace used bathroom utilities with new ones. It seems like a simple task, but you'd constantly be doing the same thing for 6 to 7 hours a day. I worked days and nights, but I would mostly work during the night. It was a quiet job, and as long as you focused on what you were doing, time would fly right by. My experience working at the hotel was somewhat nice, but whenever I look back, I think of this one incident that I came across that really freaked me out. It was during the summer of 2018, and I remember I was assigned to do a cleanup of a room that a couple had just checked out earlier and to get ready for the newcomers. I cleaned the bathrooms, replaced the sheets, made the beds, and did the usual preparations for other guests. I brought the sheets to the washers and dryers and started washing them. As I'm washing them, I hear the employee elevator coming down to the room. It came down every day for housekeepers to wash things, but as soon as it came down, I was shocked to see that there was not a single soul inside. The elevator was known to have a few problems, as we've had it for a long time, and figured it was just having problems. I started the washer and had to wait approximately 45 minutes before they were ready to be dried. I hopped on the elevator and I immediately get a strange feeling, like a presence. I felt as if someone or something was with me in that elevator. The floor to the hotel rooms came and I got out, trying to shake this weird negative feeling off. I almost panicked when I no joke felt a slight tap on my shoulder. Out of fear, I quickly turned around to see the outline of a person walking into the women's restroom. However, I remembered that particular restroom was out of order and needed cleaning, so no guest should be using it. I walked over to the restroom and saw that the lights were shut off. However, it was extremely cold in there. That's when I heard a laugh from one of the stalls that made my blood run cold. It wasn't the laugh of a child, but more so a woman. I closed the door and ran to the clerk to the lobby to tell him all about it. The clerk was very understanding toward me or any other problems I had, so he kindly went with me to the women's restroom to investigate if there was really someone in there. He checked all of the stalls but didn't find anyone. The drastic temperatures, the strange feeling, and the laugh didn't make sense. I've never been a believer in the paranormal, but I have no other explanation to this. Back in my first semester of college, I had recently moved out of my one-bedroom apartment due to a few arguments with my landlord. I won't go into any details, but let's just say it was over things that seemed unnecessary and stupid. I, of course, had to move back in with my parents, and knowing my parents, they would kick me out of the house if I wasn't working. So I went online to apply for several jobs that had openings. Eventually, I got hired to work as an assistant for a gym near my neighborhood. It was in walking distance from my house, so I wouldn't have to waste gas or money by driving. My shifts would constantly change from days to nights, and I'd mostly be working for 5 hours a day. One time, my manager said that I needed to be working the night shift for a few days as the person who normally did it was out of town. It seemed unfair to me, but I sucked it up and went with it. My first day on the night shift went well. The gym wasn't too overcrowded, and you maybe have at least 3 or 4 people sign in every hour. I was working the front desk, giving keys for lockers and stuff like that. The next night, however, is when things got a little weird. It was around 8 p.m. and the gym was pretty much dead at this point. There were only about maybe 3 people working out. It was a small gym, so it was normal to have very few people at this time. I was organizing some papers and putting them into their proper folders when some guy walked into the gym. However, he didn't do anything else once he entered the building. He just stood there with his hands in his pocket as if he were waiting for the bus. Me, being polite, I asked if I could help him with something. He didn't move and just stayed there still, looking at the wall. I was about to go over to him, myself, but he then looked at me and started to walk over to me. He came up to me and said that he needed help fixing his car and that the engine was broken. I told him that I couldn't help him and offered to call someone who could. He began to frantically tell me no and that I needed to help him. Once again, I had told him no and that I was busy, but I would offer to call someone for him. He kept on asking and asking until he finally got the hint. With that, he left the building, and that's when I saw him get into his car and drive away. The scariest part is that if he claimed his car didn't work, how could he have drove off? That question still comes to mind till this day whenever I think about it. What would have happened if I accepted and went with him to his car with him? It still creeps me out. When I was around 25 years old, I worked as a janitor at a local community college during the night shift. I would sometimes work the day shift, but it was mostly the night shift, which I actually enjoyed. Even though I was the only janitor on duty throughout the college, I still kept to myself. I'd mop the floors while listening to music, grab some food, and enjoyed myself with the peace and quiet. One night, on a Monday I believe, I was doing my usual routine of mopping the floors when I heard a loud crash. I stopped dead in my tracks and took off my earbuds out to hear better. However, I didn't hear anything and dismissed it as being my music. At one point, I was finishing mopping the halls of the second floor when I happened to walk by a classroom where I noticed something odd. I took a closer look and realized that the little window of the classroom door had been smashed open. My heart dropped and my fears were confirmed. I didn't see anything or anyone in there as it was pitch black inside the room. The only thing I could do was to call the police and report the incident. I would have just radioed in the security guard, but he was unfortunately out sick for the week. The police had told me that I should flip on the light to confront the intruder or whoever was there and that the police were on their way. I took out my key and opened the door and tried to feel around for the light switch. But the only thing I felt was a very clammy, cold hand. I tried to move my hand away, but it was too late. Whoever was on the other side started to pull my arm, trying to bring me to inside the room. Eventually, I saw my chance. I took my key and poked him in the arm as hard as I could. That was enough to make him scream in pain and run straight past me out the doors. However, the police had thankfully arrived just in time to catch him and, of course, arrest him. Turns out that he had a .49 and some cocaine in his back pocket. So, yeah. I don't work the night shifts anymore, and I feel more comfortable and safe working with my fellow janitors during the day shifts. I still have no idea as to what his intentions were. I don't know if he was homeless, planning on robbing the place, or a drug dealer. What I still don't understand about the whole thing is how he managed to get a key to have access to that classroom. That question still pops into mind sometimes. This took place when I was around 23 years old. I recently started working at a gas station in Tallahassee, Florida as my first ever real job. I had lived with my girlfriend in a one small bedroom apartment and we could barely afford rent at the time. My girlfriend worked at a Foot Locker while I worked full time here, making very little amount of money. Whenever I worked, my girlfriend would be home taking care of our dogs, and whatever she worked, I'd be at home. One day, I was working the night shift waiting for our customers to come in for gas or whatever. During the night shift, you normally expect up to 3 or 4 people come in for a candy bar or something as a midnight snack, so the gas station was pretty much empty for the most part. At around 11 p.m., I happened to look out the window when I noticed a man dressed in all black with a hoodie on, just standing around. He wasn't facing me, but rather the opposite, with his hands in his pockets, as if he were waiting for a ride. All of a sudden, he quickly turned around and faced toward me. I looked away to try and not make any eye contact with him, but it was already too late. I could see him walking over to the shop out of the corner of my eye. He then came in and went straight to grab a beer can, and he then came to the register to pay. I told him that its total was $6.50, and he sort of laughed in a calm tone, as if I had told a joke. He said, "Yeah, I'm not paying that much." I told him that I couldn't lower the price and apologized to him. The look he then gave me was a look of anger and hate. All of a sudden, he pulls a gun out from his back pocket and has me at gunpoint. I start yelling for him to not shoot, but he only kept on getting closer to me, yelling for him to give him all the money in the register. By some miracle, a police officer approached the gas station, and the guy then took off down the street. I informed the officer, and he said that he'd be on the lookout. We reviewed the camera footage, but the police failed to find a match to the individual. I'm still thankful for my life, because things could have taken a wrong turn on that night.